You're here. You made it, and you're day drinking.
Technically.
Is
it not morning drinking, or is that just day drinking? Are they two different things?
I think morning drinking indicates more of an issue, so we're going to go with day drinking.
You have to specify.
You do have to specify. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well. I am.
Is that a true well?
It is a true well. Yes.
Where does well fall in between like fine and great?
I think it's an acceptance of great and horrible being a real thing, but you're in the middle of them both. So when you're like, I'm well, you're in the middle. You kind of are existing in between the polarities of life being like extremely amazing and what am I going to do now?
So where does I'm fine stand?
I'm fine. I feels a little bit more leaning towards the dark side.
That's
Don't
true.
you think?
I think fine is close. Yeah, right. Fine is closer to shit.
Yeah.
And well is closer to good.
Yes.
But not great.
But don't you think people like us, people who've lost our creators, if you will, at least I can speak for myself. I'm interested to see what your opinion is. Don't you think that we understand and can function in fine more and know that fine isn't so bad?
No, I mean, in retrospect to, I guess, crap situations specific to loss, yeah, I think fine is great sometimes. You know what I mean? It's a bumper sticker right there. But
it is. You should put that on your car.
Yeah, I don't know if it's like what I just alluded to with blanketing anxiety and getting confused as to if I feel anxiety or if I'm just covering it up. I think it's just maybe getting used to it and it just feels normal, but that's not healthy either.
Well, I don't think it's not healthy. I think we've been told what healthy is, and that's profitable for a lot of businesses to create a standard of health that I think is, one, very unattainable, two, extremely expensive. So you stay in this rat race, and three, not necessarily the steps we need to take to be healthy. I have so many questions for you. One, just off the top of my head, what did you do posthumously after your father passed? I know you were young, but what did you do and what do you do now to keep yourself healthy when you can feel grief pulling you in?
Well, I have like a little bit of a cheat code with biologically because I feel like I forgot so much, which frustrates me. I bring that up all the time is because when I was 12, I remember that day and leading up to it, but after I saw the towers go down, big surprise. Anyone didn't know my dad died in 9/11.
We'll get to it.
We'll get to that. And don't mind the Twin Tower pimples on my face also because it looks like the New York City skyline.
We don't see them.
Oh.
Yeah.
You don't see them?
No, I don't see them at all. I got
great.
a chimple.
A chimple?
Yeah. It's a chin pimple.
I'm not going to go down that line. It's two different things. I feel like my grief was split into halves because I had my youth where I don't remember so much. And then as I got older, there was that whole experience. So I see my grief as literally two different worlds almost.
So walk me through your first world. What was that like to be so young? Because that's an interesting subject and an interesting perspective to be so young and grieving. Because I feel like I don't think the child brain is even developed enough to be able to handle and sustain such pain and loss.
Physically, I wasn't even developed at that time. I was a late bloomer, so there's another problem there. But there's so much I forget that it comes later. So if we were to reminisce on what I experienced as a kid, you know, I don't know what came out of me. I don't know if it was because I had a good family and whatnot, you know what I mean? So I had that support system. So I still had like a good childhood. I was very blessed to have certain things around me that didn't make other obstacles an issue. But again, it's really the focus of how it happened as I got older, because things really came full circle for me as I started coming into my own and understanding my grief. Because I think at 12 years old, I knew what was happening. You understand the world at some capacity at 12, so you're not completely oblivious. So I knew how horrifying and real it was, but I still wasn't able to compute it and know how to get through it. So I really leaned on my family and just kind of like continuing through. So I wouldn't say there was a process. The process really hit me as I got older and realizing that maybe I wasn't realizing it. I try not to put the blame on my flaws and shit that I go through to correlate to me as a kid, because maybe that's just me. But then I think about, am I like this? in my intimate relationships because of what I went through as a kid. I don't know if it's important to decipher that. But again, I think I'm a extroverted loner as it is. So I spend a lot of time by myself and sitting in things. And I think for me, that was the most important thing to get through anything, let alone grief alone, was sitting in it, as opposed to finding distractions and doing things that make me put like an Advil on the grief. That didn't really work for me. I realized that quickly. So for me personally, the biggest thing that worked was allowing myself to feel, as simple as that sounds.
I am very similar. I'm definitely extroverted introvert, which a lot of people find surprising because I'm a stand-up comedian. So it's interesting that you are also similar in that sense. Talk us through what happened to your dad. I know you've probably discussed it so many times, but tell my listeners so they know what happened to your father and how you lost your dad.
Okay, listeners. So in case you didn't know about 9/11, that happened in 2001.
What?
Yeah.
I gotta go.
I know, after Y2K, just to clarify the difference there. So yeah, my dad was on the 105th floor of the World Trade Center, worked for Cantor Fitzgerald, and to not, drag out the story, I think you all know how it ends. I was
Wait.
Should I continue?
It's like an M. Night Shyamalan movie. How did it end?
Is that his brother or is it a different pronunciation?
I can't say his last name.
It's okay.
I'm bad with last names. Yours is Ferrugio.
You know what? I'm happy you brought that up, because just to clarify for your listeners, you butchered my last name.
I did. Oh, I think...
Yeah. Where are you looking? Oh, yeah. It's just to clarify, it's Ferrugio. Ferrugio, not Ferrugio.
I don't know if it was a hard or soft G.
I mean, it depends on the situation, but
Yeah,
normally it's
depends.
Ferrugio. It's cool. We'll go back to the 9/11
I
story.
wore my Italian shirt in honor of our heritage.
I almost wore a shirt that said Italians do it better, but I was like, that's too aggressive.
Oh, that would have been great.
I know. I don't want to go over the top. Where were we?
We were talking about your dad and the 105th floor
There we go.
and working for the company he was working for.
Yeah. So
And how 9/11 turned out.
Oh, we know.
It wasn't good.
I'll tell you my story. That wasn't good. It depends which side you're on, I guess.
That's true.
So I was in 7th grade. Long story long. That day was weird, let alone obviously what happened. But for me, my mom, my family made the decision to leave me in school throughout the day, which, I mean, what else are you supposed to do? There's so much chaos going on. So I remember first period, my buddy Jeff, who was notoriously late. I don't know if he came into school high at that time, 12 years old, maybe. And he walked in, he's like, hey, doesn't your dad work in the World Trade Center? I'm like, yeah, why? It's like, a plane flew into the building. I'm like, what? Like a plane? It didn't compute in either direction. I was like, wow, that sounds weird. Okay. I believe I tried going down to the office to make a phone call just to see what was up. They didn't allow me to make a call. So I just had to go through the entire day wondering what the heck was happening. People were getting called out of school. Kids were yapping this or that. And the whole day I went through school not knowing what the heck was going on. So I just went through my school day wondering. And I walked home with my best friend, James, at the time. He was suspended from the school bus before the school year started.
James sounds like a fun time.
James, fantastic. So that's one note. But it was a blessing because I'm like happy he was an asshole as a kid, because I would have rather no one else walking by my side that day. Aww. And so I remember we were talking about this, that, and the other, about speculating what happened. And when you walk into my house on Poly Way, New Jersey, you make a bend and you can start seeing my house. And that's when I saw cars everywhere. I saw a bunch of cars outside my house. That was the first moment I realized, okay, something's off, obviously. I walk in the house, and this kind of preludes my memory loss, because I remember walking in the house, I get separated from James. My mom and my family are trying to keep me away from the television. So mind you, at this point, everything happened. This is 3:00 in the afternoon. So the towers are down. The dust was settling. All this shit went down already, which to me freaks me out, because I was just oblivious to what was happening. And now playing it back again, going back and forth to a child and an adult, I'm thinking, oh my God, this was happening. My dad was dying and died when I had no idea what was happening, even though I knew something was happening, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
And then they're trying to keep me away from the TV. At this point, CNN, all those people are just repeating everything on replay. And then I forced myself to the TV, saw the towers go down, and that was when I broke down. I remember the Abertellis, my cousins were next to me. I remember just breaking down. That was the first moment of just letting it out, just realizing the horror, what the hell just went down. And it's like after that, it was like my body was like, okay, you're relax. We're not going to let you see anymore or deal with anything. We're just going to black you out there, and then you'll have to deal with it later. And that's why I feel like there's a big gap in between. I get frustrated because I can't really compute how, as a young kid, how did I do this? How did I do that? That's a question for my mom and my sisters. But this is another level of conversation. I'll allow you to direct the conversation from here. But there was a boomerang effect in my grief that just happened recently this year with my mom, of how that experience and what we went through with grief and loss and all my family kind of came full circle for me. And I don't know if you have other questions lined up, but it's a very powerful experience of how my grief prepped me for life, essentially.
Yeah, grief really does prepare you for so many different facets and experiences that you go through. I think, for one, the one thing that I have experienced, and I'm wondering if you've experienced, is how these sort of inane experiences can trigger grief. How you lose something so insignificant. Like, for me, maybe this isn't the greatest example, but my dad bought me a necklace when I was 16, this thick Italian Figaro link. You know, there's nothing more Italian than someone naming a necklace Figaro. All the necklaces are named after like Italian opera singers.
The Figaro.
Figaro. And you put it on and you go, Figaro.
It's phenomenal.
So it was just a beautiful necklace. And I've had it since I was 16. When I was filming in Greece, I don't know what I did. I don't know what I did with it. I did something I never do. I took it off and it's gone. It's in the Ionian Sea somewhere. Losing that necklace reinstated and reinvigorated my grief over losing my father. And I don't know if this is for you, but I'm curious if you've had experiences in your life where you lose something not necessarily related to the person, or you go through something and it opens up that grief. And in my mind, the grief never leaves us. It doesn't. We've learned that our life grows around it and it stays as it is. But I do believe, like you said, the importance of the action of grieving and how that can be useful and how it can be something that isn't rooted in so much darkness, how it sort of teaches you how to let go of objects that have such a hold on you.
I just talked about this yesterday, and hopefully it relates to what you're talking about. I think it's a double-edged sword, because I feel like with loss specifically, and again, I've said this a bunch of times, I think there's different facets of loss. Mm-hmm. I think when what we're talking about is biological, but then you're talking about how other situations that don't relate to it, it could be just it could be a living loss also, relationships, right, this or that, jobs, whatever.
Exactly.
So, which is another interesting point. But I was thinking recently about fear and gratitude. And now stay with me. I sound a little corny, but...
No, we get corny on this.
I love it. And get a little Corona corny.
Yeah, we get Corona corny.
So what I was thinking was how I think there's a fine line between loss, grief, and fear and gratitude, because I think they both run parallel with each other. Because I think when you lose someone, and at what age you realize, oh my God, that hits close to home, and you realize how quickly shit can go, which is, again, all these lessons are between fear and gratitude, because you can look at it in two ways. You can be fearful and think, oh my God, this can happen again. You might grasp onto things too tightly, thinking I could lose this. It's my partner, my job, whatever it is, my loved one next to me, oh my God, they can die too. And there's that fear and anxiety towards, this happens to me. It was so real that this might happen again. So there's the fear side. Or you can look at it and say, and show gratitude, because you realize how fragile life is, and then you can be more grateful in your relationships, be more grateful in the life that you live. So, but I think those lines it's a very fine line. I think you can teeter back and forth at times, but it relates to that trigger of, if something happens and it brings up those emotions, oh my God, I can lose. I think you can go back and forth between that fear, because I think that's fear, because you've experienced this loss, it can happen again, or it is happening again. But to me, what is important is to fear and flip that shit, which is literally, if I'm feeling that fear, I just try to flip it to gratitude. As woo as that sounds, that is the balancing act of experiencing trauma and grief, is balancing that line of, am I going to be thankful for the time that I had, the time that I have, or am I just going to be completely fearful because of what I went through and that it might happen again?
I think that's a poignant point, because I do feel that in this society, we demonize certain emotions that are actually very useful for us. Fear is a tool. It's a survival mechanism, and it's also an emotional survival mechanism, which is what I believe you're touching on. And I feel and have felt the same way, where the fear of being in the moment of knowing that my father or whoever, my mother, are going to pass or could pass, it makes me so much more grateful and more present with the ones who are still in my life. Mm-hmm. And it's all about the lessons that were taught through these horrible experiences, that you can come out on the other side and be so grateful, that you still have that grace in your heart, that you can even have gratitude. Because there's also the other side. People turn very bitter. When you meet these older people or anybody in general, if you come across someone like just, a bitter woman, which is a phrase that's tossed around, what has she lost in her life or his life? And I think having gratitude can open us up to having a little bit more empathy for strangers. I do want to ask you, because you have your podcast, Dead Talks, which you've already promoted in the beginning of the show that you didn't hear, so don't think I haven't promoted you.
Did you say Ferrugio?
I will say that over and over. I'm going to name a necklace after you.
I tell you, if we ever get married, we're going to be Jessimae and David Ferrugio. You could change the last name, but can you change the pronunciation? You have to do that legally? I don't know.
Oh my God.
Anyway.
I wonder, for you, is it annoying to talk about death so much? And are you able to, it's a two-parter. Is it difficult for you to talk about death so much? And part B, what do you reap from it for yourself? Like, are you able to vicariously let go a little bit more? Are you able to find, and has this become your purpose?
I think so. I don't know. Purpose, schmurpose. I don't know what that, I don't know. Maybe. I think the one thing that I've noticed with this podcast, it hasn't so much helped me with my grief because I'm so far down the line with it. And maybe there's things I still have to figure out. But for me, these conversations have really helped me with my day-to-day stuff. Like when I'm going through other things that have nothing to do with my dad and other forms of grief, if you will, whether it's, again, relationships or whatever I'm going through, that's helped me because all the time when I talk to you, when I talk to all these other amazing guests, I'm listening to their story and how they got through grief. And it reminds me, and I say this all the time, that the process of grief and how other people like you have gotten through it is so applicable to everyday stuff we go through. So when people listen to my podcast, like, oh, it's death, I don't want to hear that. I get that. But the lessons you learn from people's perseverance and what they've gone through and how they've overcome certain situations, you can apply that to all the stuff that we go through. So I often get triggered about things I currently have in my life as opposed to my dad. It goes back and forth. Of course, there's realizations that I have and it relates to my loss. But the biggest personal, selfish experience that I have in my episodes is these conversations help me through whatever I'm going through currently, or if I'm still working out, because I've learned so much from people and different perspectives that really help me, if that makes sense. Yeah. And then in regards to getting sick of it, I think I need to take breaks once in a while. But at the same time, what keeps me going is honestly just thinking, this is just another person that is opening up to me and sharing their story. And every story is still so different, even though it's the same topic. So it stays fresh at the same time, but it's also important to me to be present to the other person talking. So again, as corny corona as that sounds, it's just important to me to allow that person to speak, which it kind of like levels me out. So even if I do feel like I'm getting I have to like take a break, just the fact that I'm talking to a new person and they're willing to talk to me, it kind of keeps me going.
I think that's beautiful without making you feel cheesy. The one thing I wonder, and the one thing I was thinking about when I knew you were going to be on the pod, which was within a short time frame, I appreciate you, is what is it like for a man to grow up without his father?
Thank you for noticing I'm a man.
You're welcome.
It sucks. Next question.
Next question. What do you put in your oatmeal in the morning?
I miss oatmeal. It just sucks. That's like it really just sucks. And the hardest part about that, again, specifically to being a man, and I'm sure it can go on either side of the spectrum, it just sucks. It's like I'm now, I still have a long way to go on what I want to do, this, that, and the other, whatever. But there's so many man-to-man moments that are coming, that have happened, that are happening, that I just want to chop it up with my dad. There's things I'm very close to my mother, very close to my sisters, and, we're very open with each other, but there's certain conversations that, a father and son can have, and that sucks. You know what I mean? But it goes back to the gratefulness, yada, yada, yada. It kind of, sometimes I get annoyed at myself. Fucking gratefulness. Like I get it, but it just sucks. It really just sucks. And the hardest part again is not sharing the new memories with the people you lost. I think that is one of the many other things, and there's layers to it. But not being able to share new memories. Like my buddy sent me a photo that I never saw, and that was such an electrifying moment because it was as if I could have created a new memory. I saw a photo I'd never seen, so to me that was the closest thing I could experience to a new memory. Oh my God, it's a photo of me and my dad I never saw, and it felt new. And that reminded me of how much it sucks not to share those new memories with my dad and not having to be able to ask a man-to-man question about what I feel like I would get advice from a father figure. And I had plenty of father figures in my life, but at the end of the day, I don't know my dad, and it blows.
It does blow. And besides your mother and your family, you mentioned father figures. How have you been able to, without a lack of a better term, compensate for the void that your father has placed in your life?
I got a really big truck.
You have conversations with your truck about?
No, I did. I actually did buy a Ford Bronco, 96 Bronco, the same truck that he had. But
that's cool.
It was pretty badass, actually. He used to drive the OJ, the white OJ, and so I ended up just spontaneous. I went for coffee at 7:30 in the morning, ended up leaving with a 96 white OJ.
That's very random.
I know, you could cut this part out. But
no. We're going to keep it all in.
I don't compensate. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. Like, how have you been able to, replace is a horrible word. Where are you able to fulfill the space where your father is not? With who? How are you having these manly conversations and man-to-man conversations? Who are you going to?
Well, I'm lucky to have, like, people talk shit about hard to find friends in LA. I hear that all the time, but I don't know. I got very blessed to have certain people around me, East Coast and West Coast. So I have plenty of people to talk to if I want to. Like my support system, my friends, my family is incredible, male and female. But to me, the more I thought about it, I think if you want to use the word compensating, for lack of better words, I think it's being that, hopefully, I don't know if I am, hopefully being that man for my mom and my sisters.
Wow.
Because this kind of tracks back, and I don't mean to divert the conversation, but when I mentioned how the grief came full circle, if you don't mind, my mother, she went into cardiac arrest in July, and I actually thought of you at one point. I'll get into that, but she went into cardiac arrest in July. I literally was flying to London, taking like my first trip in a while. Turned on my phone, landed off the plane. My sister texted me, call me, which is kind of, again, it's all fucking full. It's wild. So her heart stopped for like 10 minutes, went to cardiac arrest, landed in London, flew right back to Jersey.
Oh my gosh.
And the full circle aspect, I'm going to go back and forth, is because, and ironically, 3 weeks before my mom, she's okay now, which is a miracle in itself. That's part of the story. I had my mom on the podcast the first time. And one of the things I brought up that sticks with me is that I said to her, and I've always felt this way, I felt like a guilt because at 12 years old, I wasn't sure if I was the man of the family. I was the man of the family at that point. 12 years old, and I felt like I wasn't there for my mom. I wasn't the man. I felt like I wasn't able to show up as the man. Was I there for my sisters? Was I there for my mom? And, she did a motherly Italian things, console me, you were there, but still I felt like a gap that I wish I was more of a support system for my sisters and my mom, even though they tell you I was. And then when this happened with my mom, where her heart stopped, I flew back in ICU at 1 a.m. to see my mom in the bed, like non-responsive with a breathing tube down her throat, not sure what was going to happen. The wild part was there was one specific moment, I think a day or so later, and Mom, I hope you don't mind me sharing this story. So if you're listening,
here she is.
I love you.
What would you do if she just popped out of the closet?
I'd fucking chug this beer and dip. So there's a specific moment that it was starting to get real the day or two later when she finally came out, and I just chose to handle this certain situation, and my sister kind of validated the situation without me asking, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn, it just means a lot to me. She's like, David, in relation to this specific portion, she's like, I always seen you as my little brother, but at this moment, I didn't see you like that anymore. And after I handled this situation, she was able to step in and kind of take an approach to the situation. But the follow-up that I got from my sisters in this whole process, the week of just chaos, not knowing where my mom was going to survive, this or that, I felt like this was my opportunity, and not doing it to like be macho and I have to step up because I wasn't when I was 12. It felt natural to be there for my sisters, and they were there just as much for me. It was the collusion together was incredible. But this was almost full circle as me feeling guilty at 12 years old. Was I there for my family? Was I the man of the house for my sisters? And then this opportunity came, quote unquote opportunity. And I felt it was my opportunity to fucking be there for my sisters and be the man of the family, even though, again, they were there just as much for me. But that was the wild full circle part where it was almost as if a door could close. And I always look back, did I do enough? Could I do that? That's just like the stupid little annoying roommate in my head. Mm-hmm. But it was like a full circle moment. of realizing that I feel like I did the best I could to be the man of the house and show up for my sisters in this moment. That was the full circle event that was just powerful to me. It was a lot. And just realizing that I don't know if my family and I would be able to handle it as we did without the prior experience of loss in our life.
It is amazing how it sort of armors you, like we mentioned before, through so many different aspects of your life, but in subsequent situations where people are going to be sick or fall ill, it does sort of armor you with a resilience. It gives you some resilience and gives you a little bit more of a strength that I think only comes from loss. Do you know what your first memory is of your father?
First memory?
Earliest memory you can recall.
My earliest memory I can recall was in Staten Island. A cop wrote my dad a ticket, and I remember my dad being so pissed off. Very quick moment. And all of a sudden, the cop drives away, and I just remember my dad, you need to see this on camera, just flips off the cop and just gives him the finger and then just walks out. So I think that was my first memory of my dad, which I don't know if there's a lesson in there. Don't double park in Barlow Avenue in Staten Island. Maybe that's the lesson. So sorry, it's not a heartwarming memory, but that's definitely it. But another early memory was in Jersey. This is a little later. And my dad I never saw his temper go up. He was a very calm guy. But I remember we were talking at a light this time in Jersey, and the guy behind us honks really quickly. And I see my dad look in the rear view, and my dad was a pretty beefy guy. And he just looks in the rear view. I noticed that. I was like, okay, maybe something's happening. He pulls in the middle of the intersection, stops, gets out of the car and starts screaming at this guy and getting in his face, yelling at him this, that. And I'm looking, as a 9-year-old kid just turning around, kind of scared, not at him, just the situation. He gets in the car and he looks at me and goes, David, number 1, don't do that because the guy might have a gun. 2, don't tell your mother. And then we just drove away. And then I didn't tell my mom until he died. So I feel like I kept it together. But one thing I did want to say real quick is I was thinking of you because in that moment, with your father and Alzheimer's and memory, the whole week of my mom in the hospital, she went through a very traumatic experience, this or that, a heart stopped for 10 minutes, blah, blah, blah. Her memory was like Dory from Finding Nemo. It was, you tell her one thing and 2 minutes later she'd forget it. And we weren't sure if that was going to be there. We had to give it time, stay positive. And eventually now she's back. But for that first week, her memory she doesn't remember that whole week. It was really bad. And I'm having to remind her what happened. She thought her parents were still alive. She thought my dad was still alive. That's a whole nother experience. But the balancing act of dealing with that situation, I felt so much compassion for what you went through and, thousands and millions of other people that are dealing with people with Alzheimer's, whatever the numbers are, because that was terrifying.
It is terrifying. To have somebody you love not know you, or someone, not only just someone you love, but your foundation. We're talking about our parents. I think those other adjacent relationships might be a little bit different. I can't speak on them, but to have your foundation rocky makes you rocky. And we all are born from someone. So when that is threatened or when that is compromised, your whole agency and everything about you and how you feel about yourself gets foggy and very scary, because you're like, well, am I going to be okay? And it does sound selfish, but it's survival. You're like, well, wait a minute, my mom and my dad, what about me? So it is definitely something that you have to deal with while they're alive, and you have to sort of try to not have panic attacks every other day, because you're like, well, my mom or my dad or whoever is forgetting who I am. But in the same breath, I can't imagine and could not have imagined my childhood without my dad or without my mom. That void, I wouldn't be here. Obviously, everything that happens brings us to a different place, but I can't imagine as a boy growing up without that quintessential character in your life, that the core to your manhood, the connection to your, the connection between a boy and his father is similar to like a girl and her mother. And were you closer with him as a kid or your mom, or did you have special relationships with both of them? Yeah,
I mean, I was blessed to be pretty close to both of them, but weird thought, which just kind of came to me. It was like, my dad was very present in my life. He he worked 9 to 5, 9 to 6, whatever. So I saw him. I didn't see him that much during the week. At night I did, of course, but he was very active in my life, coming to my Little League baseball games, as I feel like every New Jersey parent that does.
Yeah.
And, but the weird part was like the fact that he was so present and such a good dad in my eyes. It's like, damn, I wonder if the grief would have been easier if he was a shit dad.
I've always wondered that as well.
You know what I mean? Because the fact that he was so present and we had such a relationship, then it's ripped under you. Then it's like, it just kind of extrapolates the loss. And I'm not trying to compare anyone that didn't have a good relationship with their father or parent and then the loss, because that's still a weird thought too. Because then you could think, okay, I didn't have this relationship. Then you start grieving of the relationship you didn't have. So it's like, I'm not comparing the two. It's just an interesting thought when the rug gets pulled underneath you when you do have such a good relationship. Because I find it interesting the relationships of loss when you have good relationships and bad relationships, because they're such a different experience.
It is. I think when you do have a really good basis, you're grieving all that could have been and all that you lost that was so beautiful and meaningful. And my speculation when that is not the situation is you're grieving the same. What could have become? What if we were able to rectify? What if we were able to overcome whatever that difficulty was? We could have had a relationship. And speaking of that, listening to you talk and something that I have done to deal with grief as it is an ongoing experience in your life and how it evolves, how are you able to maintain a relationship with your father now with him being gone? Because you did mention seeing a photo and that feeling like a new memory. Mm-hmm. How are you creating new memories? How are you maintaining a relationship? And how do you think you can maintain a relationship with someone once they're passed?
I mean, this podcast is inspired by the death of my dad, my podcast, Dead Talks. And I think that in itself, was obviously inspired from his loss. If you want to say inspired, I don't know if that's the right word. Mm-hmm. So kind of through that, I'm constantly thinking about him. I think I still try to have conversations with him. Still haven't gotten a fucking answer back. So I'm still waiting for that.
Come on. Let's go.
I had a medium on my show and she was talking like he was right over my shoulder. I'm like, where? Like, I don't, am I hearing? There's like a very interesting moment.
Okay. I need to write a note about the medium. You can continue because I have questions.
Yeah, I have questions too. And I experienced it, but I think it's just, it's a feeling. I don't know. I try to, whether it's real or not, I don't know, but I try to talk to him in regards to just in my head as if he's listening. I like reinventing the stories with my family, just memories. And the photos in my house, as simple as that sounds, like constantly, he's just always around me physically with photos and talking to other people. But I'm not a religious person. I hate to say this LA answer. I guess maybe I'm spiritual. I don't know what that means either. But it's just a feeling and just thinking about him. And then when I do think about him, other thoughts come up and it's like a weird, quiet conversation that I feel like I am having with him. So just the fact that I constantly do think about him, I do feel like his memory's still with me, obviously. Like I haven't forgot him. But the weird part is it's been so long that some memories do fade. And the part of me, I'm like, damn, I forget his voice sometimes. I forget this or that. And that's the hard part is like as distance and time continues, certain things fade. But the idea of him still exists. And I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. And I don't think being spiritual is anything that's negative at all. I know we have that East Coast energy where we come into this LA world and everything is very woo-woo. So it can feel a little uncomfortable, but you're doing great.
Thanks. Yeah, it's like, East Coast have a problem with spirituality, but everyone's wearing a cross on your neck. So I'm like, what the?
A Figaro. Next to the Figaro link.
Yeah,
next to the Figaro link.
These tenors.
What are some, actually when you were speaking, I was thinking of something that I've experienced with my mother posthumously. Is I do feel sometimes, this is really crazy, I feel her essence and her being in me, like through me. Like there's been moments where I look down at my hands and I like can see her hands. And there's been moments where I feel the decision or something I say is something that she has said. Have you had any of those experiences? And I wonder if it's different because you were so young, but have you felt like, I know you said you feel your father's energy or not energy, but you can feel him and see him around you. But have you actually like felt him be a part of you today physically?
Yeah.
Have you felt your dad inside of you? That's what I'm asking, and I don't mean it inappropriately.
Yeah, it's just ironic that we're coming back to this because when you were on my podcast, we were talking about the first time I saw my dad's dick.
Oh, that's right. We did.
And now we're coming back to this. So
yes. And this is non-sexual.
And this is non-spiritual either. So, you said with the hands, like physically, I'm very similar to my dad. And apparently as I gotten older, everyone said I look just like my dad. So sometimes I catch myself. I'm like, oh shit, I actually do kind of look like my dad physically. But then there's some things I think personally that I do. Because my dad was, I always think when people talk about a eulogy, it's always positive. And we talk about, no one ever talks shit on the person that died. So I don't want to sound so convenient that my dad was this amazing person, but to me, he was. Personally, he really did light up a room. And I do remember his presence and how physically I can see other people be so happy to see him. Like he's charismatic, he's very touchy-feely. And so I'm very touchy-feely in a sense that with friends, like completely non-intimate. Like I'd rather sometimes say less and put my arm on you, and hopefully that speaks enough. That's kind of how I am. Sometimes I don't want to screw it up with my words, and I feel like I always saw him putting his arm around people and tapping his back. So sometimes when I do that, and when I meet people or see my friends and family that I'm excited to see, I try my best to be enthusiastic to see it when I see people for the first time. Like we just saw each other, or maybe I wasn't that super enthusiastic. I don't know. But that was one thing I remember with. I feel like when he first saw people, he was always so excited to see them. And I try to carry that, and not in a way that I'm just trying to force it. Like, it is amazing when you see someone. Like we haven't seen each other in a while, however long it goes from here. It's important to make other people feel good. And I feel like he was really good at that. And that's something I try to carry. So when I do that, I feel like I feel him.
Yeah. And I think it's also a way to maintain a relationship. It's in a way inadvertently continuing some sort of connection to them, and also a way to have their essence and what they did, their legend, if you will, live on vicariously through us. I do want to know, have you thought of, and do you currently have lessons or mottos that you have acquired from your father or learned from your father, like the way he lived? Is there any credos or even slogans or something your father would say or believe that you yourself think about, or lessons that he taught you?
The biggest thing that always stands out for me, it's always the little things in life. And it's something that we've all heard before, but it was always the little things in life are the best things in life. Little things and family. Those are the two things. It's very Italian to say the family thing, but
we are sanctimonious, but it's what it is.
These are some great words here. I feel like you have your laptop out to look for a thesaurus.
I have words that I use every day, and so today it was sanctimonious.
Yeah, no,
it was posthumous.
Debbie over there is like crossing out words Nancy. That you've used already.
That's Nancy.
Yeah, ultimately those are my two biggest things, and I try to focus on that, because when things get too heavy for me, and I feel like usually we're looking at the big things too much, and I think the big things are often overwhelming. So when I look at the little things, that kind of calms me down and makes me realize what's important. Because when I think about memories in general, like say, it's not always so much, oh my God, I went on this big trip. It was The Bachelor, it was this or that and the other. It's always the specific moments within those memories, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And those are the little things, and the little things of life. I used to see my dad when he was so proud to get like his first house. He's picking weeds off the ground, like little tiny things like that. He'd have a cigar, he'd sit down, he'd just laugh, this or that. It was always the little things. And I think the little things in life are literally the most beautiful things in life that we tend to lose focus on with all the chaos that's going on. It's always this bigger picture. It's all the shit that's going around us. But if you just like zoom it back into the little things, the little moment of looking at your significant other, stuffed Doritos in her mouth, those little moments are the best moments that stick with me personally. It's always those little things. And I think that was a big lesson for me to how to live my life. And also when life gets too heavy, how to bring it back.
Yeah. It reminds me of a quote that I thought of or found after my dad died. And it said, "You'll never know the value of a moment until it becomes a memory." I think it was Dr. Seuss.
It doesn't rhyme though.
It's true.
Doesn't everything you say rhymes?
Yeah, maybe he off-roaded one day.
Is this like a Dr. Seuss that was like actually a doctor and it wasn't the author?
We're going to find out right now.
Say it again, the quote.
"You'll never know the value of a moment until it becomes a memory." Let's see. I could be wrong. Dr. Seuss. Maybe it was him speaking and not writing, because it should rhyme.
It should rhyme. Maybe
we got gypped.
It's Dr. Seuss, the plastic surgeon.
That's a different Dr. Seuss. One death, two death. How bad was your dad's breath? No. I want to know now, with everything that you're doing with your podcast, and you're doing a street meet now.
Yeah, you should do that one time.
I would love to. Debbie and I were just talking about that.
Yeah, we should try that.
Tell me what you're doing in the streets.
Well, yes, I'm doing these interviews in the streets. I'm just literally talking to strangers and asking them about loss, death, and what happens after death. Have you lost someone? Blah, blah, blah. So I ask the same 3 questions as have you lost someone? And then from there, I'll improvise and try to get it out of them. Then it's what do you think happens after death? And then are you scared of dying? Those are like the 3 staples, but it's been incredible. Like so far I've done it in Venice, Hollywood. I did it in Amsterdam recently. I did it in the city a couple of times in Madison Square Park and Washington Square Park. And it's amazing to see how many people are willing to talk to you. New York, way more. Except Madison Square Park, that was way too white collar. But in general, I think it's just an powerful conversation as part of the whole mission that I'm trying to do is just normalize death. I'm not a grief expert. I'm a grief experiencer, I guess. I don't have any credentials. It's the conversation and normalizing with quote unquote normal people that I think is important to me. And I thought it was just fun to get on the street and just talk to random people and just, you learn so many different experiences. You ask them the interesting part is you ask them the same 3 questions and you constantly get different answers. To explore people's beliefs, experiences without judgment and just show interest in asking them whatever my beliefs are, it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. It's so interesting to me to hear other people share stories because we're storytelling creatures and what better to learn through other people's experiences than by hearing them talk.
Especially the one experience that we all experience, but none of us personally experience. Like we all experience death, but we don't never experience what the wake of our own death does. Like we can experience dying, the act of dying, but as far as the death is something that we don't experience. I think that's kind of trippy. Like you don't really get to experience your own death.
Do you believe that when you do die, you were able to witness what's going on, or are we gone?
That's a really good question. I do believe, and it seems to be that the brain dumps some fun chemicals. Seems to be like whatever dump truck is going on in the alley right now. That's your brain.
Dropping 12 pounds
dropping
of DMT.
Yeah. I do think something kind of trippy happens. Mm-hmm. And I do believe that there is something beyond the meat suit we're in. What happens after we die, I'm not quite sure. I don't know. What do you think happens after?
Have you done DMT?
No.
Well, I've done it. And I've
done it. It's the most Italian you've sounded this whole podcast. Well, I've done it. And I didn't like break through as a quote, but people I've explained it as like the dying drug. Mm-hmm. And if I were to speculate what that transition is, that was it. That's how you think it felt, and that's how you think it would be.
It was like a transition. It was like, whoom, and then you're just somewhere else.
Where were you?
Nowhere special. It was like it's like North Jersey in February. No, it was just like this white place for me. And again, there's like another level I didn't get to. It's a whole other conversation.
It's like Super Mario Brothers.
Mario and Luigi. I almost spilled out a sketch I'm about to do relating to that, but I can't put it out there yet.
Okay.
So it was just a transition to where we are now, and then all of a sudden it's like my eyes quote unquote rolled in the back of my head, and then you're literally, I felt like I was somewhere else. For me, it was all white. It was utopia. I got through like a fear part because I was scared of what the hell was happening. I was still conscious, but at some point, I didn't have any questions. I didn't ask any questions, but it was as if all my questions were answered, and that's why I feel like it makes sense. I'm like, we go to this place. Nothing was bothering me. I wasn't thinking about this, that, the other, completely stress-free. I was just content. I was like very maintained. And as if any questions that I would have or had were answered, and that was it. I know everything now. And it was all okay. No matter what I knew, what I didn't know, it was all okay. And it was an incredible utopia. And that experience kind of made sense to me. I didn't feel like a body. I just felt like I was just kind of conscious, and I was just existing as like an energetic force.
That's what it felt like when I went under to get dental work.
Okay.
And then I woke up and then there was a hole in my mouth. And the dentist goes, "Can you believe Phil Collins used to be a sex symbol?" And I said, "I think I'm still dead." I'm pretty sure I'm still under. And then that guy got fired.
Okay.
Because he put me under and I asked to not go under.
Oh, that's a problem.
It's exactly what it felt like, though. I think he might have just tested out his black market DMT on me and then did dental work.
Do you feel okay after? Because it's like a weird place to be unconscious.
I have not made a full recovery. I will never financially or emotionally recover from that dental visit.
Should we start a new podcast and talk about how you feel? Because that's terrifying. Genuinely.
Okay, so to answer the question, I want you to answer the question. What do you think, now you've had a DMT trip-ish, what do you think happens after we die?
Keyword think, because I have no idea. Mm-hmm. I do think there's something else. I don't know if that means unicorns and angels in the sky. Again, I'm not a physicist or anything of the sort, but Einstein's quote of saying energy cannot be created nor destroyed makes sense to me, because if we are by definition energy, like you think of an atom, I'm speaking out my ass here, but if you think of an atom, by definition, atom, from my understanding, is energy. And if we are created by atoms, then we are therefore energy. Everything is energy. And if energy cannot be created nor destroyed, can be transmuted, then in some form we continue. The question to me is, are we conscious? Because like, are we just energy and we float around with no thoughts? I don't know. I do think there's something else. The idea of reincarnation has been sitting with me a little bit more, which scares the shit out of me. I don't know if I want to do this again, to be honest.
Right. What if you come back as like a cricket?
Well, whatever. You're dead in like what, 2 years? How long do crickets last?
I don't know. What if you were like a store-bought cricket and you get fed to a boa constrictor? That would suck. You're not even a free cricket. You're a cricket in a pet store.
A cricket? Yes, that's terrifying, actually.
Wouldn't that be horrible? Like, do we get a choice for this whole reincarnation thing?
Yeah, if I came back, I would not come back as a Jets fan, because that's like a cricket life. Fucking terrible. It is torture. But anyway, back to the topic. It is just, I don't know, it freaks me out. The idea of eternity after this, that's like another balancing act. If we do continue on, does this just not end? Because if that's my thought. If energy cannot be created or destroyed, and we just continue on forever, like Jim Jeffries said in one of my favorite stand-up comedic performances ever, he said, like, eventually you're going to get bored. No?
That's a good point. But then
Maybe
again,
not.
I miss boredom. Not that I'm asking for death. Back up.
You miss boredom?
I miss boredom.
You're never bored?
Well, I am bored. I'm just saying I miss like the childhood style of boredom where our minds get to roam and we daydream, because essentially daydreaming is a result of boredom. And I think boredom is what we need more of. So maybe there's some sweet inventions we create in death.
I hope not. I heard one theory real quick that this girl had on my podcast. She's had a near-death experience, medium, whatever you believe. Her experience as to what happens is that we choose everything. So two things. She was talking about reincarnation, that we come back. Her experience is she went to the other side, and she explains how there's soul ages, quote unquote, like we're old souls and young souls, as we've heard before. And I asked her a question. I said, how come some people that die, quote unquote, don't have near-death experiences? Because in the comments section here, they're all the time, that's BS. I died for 10 minutes. I didn't see anything. Her explanation from her mouth was that if you're a younger soul, not biological age, a younger soul, quote unquote, you're a new soul, you won't see anything on the other side because you still have too much to learn. So I guess it's kind of Buddhist in regards to, if they saw the other side, it's so magnificent, it's so ridiculously loving and warm and this or that, you're not going to come back. So her experience was she went to the other side, she chose to come back. It wasn't like her ancestors, like, you got to go back. She chose to come back. So to her thing is, we choose this life. So before I became David Ferrugio, I chose
Ferrugio.
David Ferrugio.
Ferrugio.
Forget about it. I chose to do this. Like, she's like, you chose this. You knew you were going to live this life, but you wanted to experience this life to learn all these lessons. And eventually, as you've experienced all these lessons, you keep coming back possibly to, because like I still have unfinished business type thing. And then eventually at some point you've experienced anything, you've transcended, if you will, and then you just stay on the other side. That was her whole thing. We keep coming back and you choose the life that we have. And then the thought is, okay, why would I choose like some terrible shit that happens to you? But that's kind of part of the lessons. And to me, it kind of like, if I were to speculate and just have fun with the conversations, if you like bring it back microscopically, when we live our life as an individual, as who we are now, we're always trying to level up, right? We're always trying to be better, level up, transcend our life, be a better person, do that, extrapolate that. So like the greater, whatever the heck it is, it's kind of like that, extrapolate on one, like this is one life I live, hopefully I leveled up, then another life, and you keep leveling up just in multiple lives. I don't know.
It's Super Mario Brothers.
It's Super Mario Brothers.
You're having to keep punching up that mushroom, eat the mushroom and experience a different experience. And then you get that, and then you get another mushroom, and then you go on to the next level.
And eat mushrooms is the key.
Yeah, the whole key is just to eat mushrooms.
I'm telling you, that's the truth. That's the truth. I did hear on your set talking about mushies a little bit.
I do condone them. For myself, at least when my mother passed away, I microdosed almost daily after that. Meditated every single day and microdosed on psilocybin.
What did you notice with your meditations on psilocybin?
That I was able to be calmer. I was able to find a place of solace within the grief. That I was able to understand what I needed in order to give myself space. Because that's essentially what the meditation became. It became a space for me to feel whatever I was feeling. Because I was home upstate with my sister and her family and her kids. And obviously that lifestyle can be a little chaotic and also beautiful in of itself to help with grief. The distractions become tools for grief management in a way. The kids and all of the inner workings of that sort of daily life chaos that goes with that. But meditation and mushrooms, I don't know how I would have navigated the grief without them. And it totally evolved my viewpoint on medicine and our modern idea of medicine, and also the type of medicine we really need, because we only talk about medicine when it comes to disease, but what about medicine in the sense of management, in health management? That's not to say that we need prescriptions constantly. I'm not talking about a pharmaceutical medicine. I'm talking about plant medicine, and I'm talking about meditation as a medicine and sort of expanding upon what that word means. Because I think now that grief, I don't know if you saw, I think it was in Psychology Today, prolonged grief is now considered a disorder, which I think is absolutely ridiculous.
What?
Yes, exactly. It's considered something that is basically another disorder that they can prescribe medication for, as I understand it.
That makes sense.
I could be wrong. I could have misread the article, and people love to correct me. Please send me email, jessimaepelusocomedy@gmail.com, if you think I'm wrong and interpreting this wrong, or what your interpretation of it was. But the way I interpreted it is that they basically said, if you're grieving for more than a year, you have prolonged grief.
What?
What?
Yeah, then everyone's lost.
Then everyone's got prolonged grief, by the way. What about parents who lose their kids? You think they're ever going to get over that? So a mom who lost her kid over a year, if she's still sad, has prolonged grief.
I don't like the idea of just titling something is not a disease, but it's something like that. When you put a title on it,
right,
it just adds even more questions. I feel like that would fuck you up even more. I have a disorder now.
Right. Well, that gives you, cause for medication.
Yeah, and the medication is not gonna be there to heal you. It's gonna be prescribed.
You can
in perpetuity.
Yeah, exactly. And you can find ways to manage your grief. You create your own medicine. Is really what I learned through grief is I can create my own medicine regimen, and it's not going to include one fucking pharmaceutical. And that's not to say pharmaceuticals don't work for people. I'm sure they do, and I don't not believe that they're not useful. I understand that there are uses for it and keep people alive. I'm talking about instances where there are so many other ways to manage it.
Well, let me ask you quick. I don't know how much time we have.
Yeah, we got a couple more minutes, I think.
Real quick for you.
We're good. A couple more minutes.
The psilocybin for you, like what specifically did you pull from it? What did it do? I know you kind of alluded to it, but did it teach you this? Did it open something? What did it do to you? Like specifically tools wise? Specifically
tools wise, it made it so that when I wasn't meditating or when I wasn't on psilocybin, that I was able to be more present. I didn't have as much anxiety.
That carried over though when you're not on it?
Mm-hmm. It really rewires your brain. It definitely affects the neural pathways in your brain, and I do think it deviates and creates new neural pathways. Again, I am not a doctor. This is just what I understand, what I've read, and what I've experienced, is it does feel like a rewiring. And for me, when I wasn't on psilocybin or when there wasn't psilocybin in my body, I just felt calmer. I felt more playful. I felt more present. That's not to say I didn't have moments where I was extremely riddled with sadness and grief, of course, but that is a part of the whole thing. But I do believe that the meditation and the psilocybin in union, because it was such a low dose, it really helped calm me, and it helped me not get so anxious and so worried and so deep into that emotion. But then I also was able to realize the value of those emotions. The one thing I want to ask before you leave, there's two things I want to ask you before you leave. First, I want to know, and this might be a heavy question, do you remember the last memory you have of your father?
Yes. The last memory I have of my dad, and part of me is like, am I making this memory up? We went to a Yankee game. I want to say it was, and I tried looking up the date, which makes sense because Tino Martinez did hit a home run that day. We went to see a Yankee game. I think it was a couple days before, so it was September, so end of the season. I caught a Yankee game with him, and what I remember is we got like cheap seats, but then he schmoozed his way up and got us like really close seats, and we just like snuck in. And as soon as we snuck into those seats, Tino Martinez was up, lefty batter, my favorite Yankee of all time probably. And so and we were on the third base side, so it was a great view for like looking right down the first baseline, and he hit a fucking bomb to right field, and it was just the perfect view of him over, like looking the perfect line of the right field home run. And that was the last Father Sunday that we had together. He snuck me up, good seats. Yankees won. Want to say 4-0, and Tino Martinez, my favorite player, hit a home run. That was the last collective memory of like a day together. And the memory that sticks in my head, and to me, the only thing I recollect is this was the night before. I believe in my head, that's how I stuck it, but I don't know. It's been so long. I don't know if I'm making it up. I believe it was September 10th. My dad never had a shirt on, and I find myself doing the same thing. And granted, I live alone. And he gave me one of these, like, his side body turn in the hallway saying he's going to bed, and kind of gave me a little salute. And it was just, that was the last memory of him giving me a little wave and just saying goodnight. And that is, I believe, the last time that I saw him. And it's so weird in those moments because you don't know. Like, now I know that was the last moment. That's the only time you know it's the last moment, is when they're gone. And so that's why, to me, it's cliche. It's so important to treat it like it is the last moment and not in a pessimistic way, just because you don't know. We don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen when I leave this place. It's just you don't know. And it's not pessimistic. It's not morbid. That is the beautiful thing about death, is that when you do consciously think about it, not in a morbid way, it helps you live a fuller, more present, more grateful life.
That's so beautifully put. I guess my last question, even though I have 1,000 other ones, we're going to have to do a part 2. Part 3, I guess it would be, if we're considering and counting the podcast we did together with your podcast. Mm-hmm. What's the biggest lesson that you've learned and are learning continually from grief?
Oh, there's so many lessons in there. I think, again, for me, it kind of goes back to what I was saying, is just the fragility of life, and the awareness of the fragility of life changes the way how I live my life. And it helps me bring it back a lot quicker. I think due to my experience with loss, and again, there's so many other people that have it so much worse than me. Even with my experience, I'm like, my life's been great, even with that, just to preface. But the awareness of the fragility of life and how quickly something can take from you goes back to that fear and gratitude. It allows me to bring it back, like I mentioned, with the macro-micro perspective. It allows me, when I am getting carried away, when I do feel anxious, when I do feel nervous, to pull it back a lot easier. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that means, but I feel like when I do get nervous and I'm going through something shitty, this experience of loss and this lesson just reminds me to be present and understand it is what it is. I hate saying it is what it is, but this is the situation, understanding what I can and cannot change. And when I understand that this situation is, I can't change it, like grief that happened, can't change it. What can I do now? And be more solution-based and moving forward while being present. So that's kind of a convoluted answer, but the experience with grief has allowed me to live life in a way that is more playful and more understanding that shit will happen. It's going to happen. It's inevitable. And to try to look at life in a lens of literally gratefulness, and just be aware of what you have now and continue moving forward with that.
Well, thank you for being here. I really appreciate you sharing your story, and I look forward to chatting with you again about grief and loss. You guys can check his podcast, Dead Talks, out on Spotify, everywhere you listen to podcasts, I assume. And your street show is available. You can see clips on his Instagram page as well, and on your YouTube page. Yeah,
it's everywhere at Dead Talks Podcast. I think I just started Instagram for Street Talks, I believe.
Smart.
Forgetting. Yeah, yes. No, I did. At Dead Talks Street Talks, I think. I don't know. Just Google Dead Talks. You'll find everything, I think.
Sounds great. Bye, guys.
Thank you.